So this morning we are jumping back through time, and we're going to the book of Daniel, and we're going to be doing just a couple segments on Daniel. I don't know what I was thinking when I gave the scripture this week, because I don't know why I would start at verse 3. We're going to start at verse 1, of course. But Daniel chapter 1, verse 1, and it's not through 21. I don't know. Nope, it is 21. I'm just kidding. Sorry, I'm going crazy. But yeah, we're going to be doing a several-part series on the book of Daniel, so it'll be fun. Looking forward to it. If you're looking in a Pew Bible, you can find it in the Old Testament on page 555 through 556. Oh, and I'm going to butcher some names. Get ready. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem, and he besieged it. The Lord let King Jehoiakim of Judah fall into his power, as well as some of the vassals of the house of God. These he brought into the land of Shinar and placed the vessels in the treasury of his gods. Then the king commanded his palace master Ashpenaz to bring some of the Israelites of the royal family and the nobility, young men without physical defect and handsome, versed in every branch of wisdom, endowed with knowledge and insight, and competent to serve in the king's palace. Whew. They were to be taught the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of royal rations of food and wine. They were to be educated for 3 years, so that at the end of that time they could be stationed in the king's court. Among them were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah from the tribe of Judah. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the royal rations of food and wine, so he asked the palace master to allow him not to defile himself. Now God allowed Daniel to receive favor and compassion from the palace master. The palace master said to him, "I am afraid that my lord and king, he has appointed your food and your drink. If he should see you in a poorer condition than the other young men of your own age, you would endanger my head with the king." Then Daniel asked the guard whom the palace master had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. You can then compare our appearance with the appearance of the young men who eat the royal rations, and deal with your servants accordingly to what you observe." So he agreed to this proposal and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was observed that they appeared better and fatter than all the young men who had been eating the royal rations. So the guard continued to withdraw their royal rations and the wine they were to drink, and they gave them vegetables. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and skill in every aspect of literature and wisdom. And Daniel also had insight into all visions and dreams. At the end of the time that the king had set for them to be brought in, the palace master brought them into the presence of Nebuchadnezzar, and the king spoke with them. And among them all, no one was found to compare with Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they were stationed in the king's court. In every matter of wisdom and understanding concerning which the king inquired of them, the king found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel continued there until the 1st year of King Cyrus. Amen. So the Israelites in this story, in this beginning of Daniel, find themselves in a different generation, but a similar story. We have spent so much time in John's Gospel over the past couple months that we haven't really had the opportunity to explore much else. Daniel brings to mind gripping tales of a fiery furnace, Daniel's friends being thrown inside only to be called out from the fires unsinged by the very king who had them thrown in. Or Surely you have seen some sort of artful depiction of Daniel standing confidently in the den of lions, patiently waiting to be retrieved unscathed. I looked some of those up, and some of them ranged from him just standing like this to some petting the lions. You might recall some of the visions that he shares or that he interprets as well. But we must be reminded of the roots of Daniel's history. The story itself takes place in the 6th century BCE, and scholars believe it to be written and tweaked between the 4th and 1st century BCE. So that's a lot of time to reflect on what's happened. But Daniel opens up with a date of sorts. They don't just come out and say it like you would here these days, but the date, it's indicated by the rulers, King Jehoiakim of Judah and King Nebuchadnezzar. Judah is once again being attacked, as is the reality for any smaller nation around a superpower such as Babylon at the time. It's here that we see the exile of the Jewish people. Some go and some stay. In Daniel's case, he goes to Babylon and he goes to the court of the king. This indicates to us that Daniel himself comes from some sort of important or very wealthy family. But make no mistake, he is a slave. He is a vassal. He is essentially a hostage. We might read this and think, royal portions, all right, it can't be that bad. Daniel's probably eating at the Golden Corral every night. However, it is likely that Daniel himself experienced the slaughter of his own people, the desecration of their holy place, and the subjugation of the Babylonian Empire, whose might is unmatched at this time. It's simply the reality of the Israelites, and many interpret the book of Daniel as an attempt to bring the people hope in this difficult time, which we will see itself extend itself to other empires and to other oppressors. So how do you cope when everything is taken away from you? How do you continue to worship a God when there's one of two worldviews that's happened? Either God let that happen, or God has been defeated by foreign gods. How do you faithfully follow Yahweh when you are ordered to serve the gods of Babylon under the threat of death? Not only that, but you are the minority. And the social pressure, not just to worship these gods, but to simply assimilate into Babylonian culture is so great. Well, the book of Daniel is a how-to for the Israelites. It gives them hope and provides role models, heroes who are faithful and protected by God. Not only are they faithful, but they thrive even in enemy territory. And this is the story of Daniel. It's in the beginning of his story where we hear how Judah has been overtaken by the Babylonians and Daniel has been brought to Babylon in exile. Here, because of his status and apparently his rugged good looks, he is forced into service for King Nebuchadnezzar. First, he must train to be a proper servant. It's a 3-year process, and Daniel is taken from his family along with several other boys from prominent Israel families. They are given access to the royal pantry, and one can only assume that this includes maybe more desirable things to eat, things that individuals with less means might not be able to afford. It could have been a pantry full of smoked bacon, maybe delicately seared sea scallops, or popcorn shrimp. But these things have in common, if you're Jewish, you can't eat them. Maybe they had access to more fruits and vegetables, cheeses. Who knows? Maybe there could have been a margarita machine in there. The idea was that if they had the best food available to them, then they should be able to perform better than everybody else, right? That makes sense. It, in part, is a story about how the Israelites, what they're supposed to do when they're confronted with the option of assimilation into Babylonian culture. Whatever was in the pantry, the Israelites are not supposed to be eating it. And so Daniel talks with the palace master first and then the guard and asks if it's okay for him and his friends to just eat the normal stuff. Now, the palace master resists, but the guard gives in. But the consensus is that they are worried because everyone believes that if you eat this fancy stuff, the indulgent stuff, the stuff that the Babylonians eat, then you're going to be strong like the Babylonians. They are, after all, the ones who won the war. This proposition makes the palace master and the guard nervous, but Daniel and his buddies get the guard to agree to a 10-week trial period. The amazing part, these boys who have been staying true to the diet of the Israelites begin to look better. They perform better than those who have not. And the text doesn't tell us if the others who ate from the royal pantry were Israelites, and if they were breaking away from their culinary customs, or if they were captives from many of the other nations which Babylon had drawn under its influence. But the king calls them and quizzes them and finds out that Daniel and his buddies, who had been on the Israelite diet, were 10 times smarter, 10 times healthier, 10 times fatter. It sounds kind of like a bad infomercial. But it's a story that speaks hope to a community that is trying to find and maintain their identity amidst a changing world. It may not be about what foods we're supposed to be eating or not eating, but we as a church are in the midst of a changing cultural landscape. First Christian has been in search of its identity for some time, and while it has been a slow process, we are beginning to rally around an identity where questions, where thoughts, where journeys are welcome. We are beginning to rally around the idea that First Christian is a place of radical hospitality. We are beginning to show the community of Rome, as Cynthia so eloquently put, that our building may be old, but our ideas are not. That was good. That was a good quote. The truth is that we continue to affirm our identity. We can see a glaring need for the gifts that we have in the city of Rome, that people are looking for a place with less answers but allows more questions. A place where theology and action are not independent of one another, but rather help each other, support each other, and inform each other. We're not there yet, to be honest with you. And we may never get there in a permanent sense. And it is probably more accurate to think of it as a process for us as individuals, but doing it with one another to bond this community together. I don't want us to see this as a pat on the back like, oh yeah, we're doing really good. I think of this as more of a, we're walking in the right general direction and we've got a ways to go, but you know what? We're doing it together. Daniel and his companions went against the grain to stay true to who they were. We as a church are uncovering who God is calling us to be, and it might be a little bit different than what other churches are doing or what other churches have done before. As the landscape around the church universal and our little corner of the church continues to change, we too continue to change. It is a new church year. A new church leadership will take its place. A new minister will be called to lead a congregation different than it was 4 years ago. Different than it was 13 years ago. Parts change, parts die, and parts are reborn. But the comforting and scary thing is we can't be anything else than what God has created us to be. Amen.